Hello YouTube people, it's Brandon coming to you from Toronto Mod Shop, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to change the spark plugs in your car. Let's jump out and take a look at what we're going to need. Alright guys, so now let's take a look at what we're going to need. First thing you're going to need, in my case, was a 10mm nut driver and a 10mm socket on a 3/8 ratchet. This is to take the engine cover off. Once the engine cover is off, you need to get the plugs out. So you're going to need this, which is, in my case, a 5/8 spark plug socket. You might need the bigger one. But I also use a flexible 3/8 ratchet for the spark plugs because I find it easier to get to them. Once the old plugs are out, you're going to need to put new plugs in. In my case, I'm using NGK platinum tip plugs. These should be pre-gapped, but in the case that they're not, I also have my feeler gauge out so I can check the gap on them. Once the plugs are kind of in, you're going to want to torque them. This is my 3/8 torque wrench. Got to get the torque number off the internet. And last thing is WD-40. Because in the case that anything's stuck, I don't want to break any bolts, so I'll squirt them with this penetrating fluid and they'll come off easier. Alright, so now let's get started. Alright, so let's take the engine cover off. I've already sprayed them with WD-40 and cracked them off with the ratchet, so now I'm just going to take them off with the nut driver. Alright, wiggle, 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 and there you go. Alright, so the next step is to take off your ignition coils. What I'm going to be using is a 10mm socket, 3" extension, and a 3/8 ratchet. Alright, let's take them off. Just crack them all loose. Alright, now that they're all loose, what I like to do is use this like screwdriver, since the nut driver won't reach down here because it's under here. Threads left there. 3 and 4. There you go, now that they're loose. Out your nut bolts. Don't lose those, put them somewhere safe. Put them on top of my toolbox. And now, wiggle coils out. They're just held in. There's friction fit to the back of the plug. There you go. So now that those are out, just get them out of the way. And next, you can get the plugs out. Alright guys, so the next thing to do is take your spark plug socket and your 3/8 ratchet and extension. In my case I had to take off a 3" extension and put a 6" one on. And let's get the plugs out. The way the spark plug socket works is it's basically a 3/8 extension, 5/8 extension with a rubber ring inside that grips the back of the plug, so when it gets loose, as you'll see in a second, hopefully soon. Oh, there we go. It grips the plug like that. Alright, so that's one plug. I'm not going to show you guys all 4. The process is the same. Just loosen it off and take it out. And then let's move to the next step. Alright guys, so all the plugs are out. There's 3 of them. One of them's actually already back in. Forgot to start the camera. But there's 3 of them. As you can see, these are still good. These are actually iridium plugs. The ones I bought are platinum. So these are better. So what I'm actually going to be doing is reinstalling these back in and returning the other ones. But in your case, if you need to replace them, the process is the same. You're just putting them in and torquing them. One thing I did realize is that these were really hard to get out, and there is some oxidation in the threads. So what I'm going to be doing is putting a little bit of this Permatex anti-seize lubricant, tiny bit on the threads. That way they don't get stuck in there for the next time I do this. One thing I'm going to recommend for you, obviously you use the spark plug socket to get them out because it has the rubber ring inside to grab the plug, so you can take it out of the channel. But when you're trying to put them back in, what tends to happen, once this is on there, you pull on your extension to get your socket back, and the socket ends up staying in there. So what I'm going to recommend, which is what I do, is instead of using a spark plug socket to reinstall them, I just use a regular 5/8 deep socket. Alright, so let's get these lubricated and get them back in. What you're going to do is basically just snug them. Not tight yet, because you'll torque them after. Alright, so let's get them back in. Alright, so I just thought I'd show you guys kind of what the plug looks like. So, if you can see that there, the plug's still kind of good. So what you're going to be doing now is take a little bit of anti-seize, just that like that, a little bit on the threads, it'll spread itself out when it's being screwed in. And there you go. So now let's get the plugs in. Alright guys, so all the plugs are anti-seized and in there a little bit snugly. The next thing to do is go online, or probably should have done this before you started. Basically get the torque spec for your spark plugs. In my case, I have access to Mitchell On Demand, which is a kind of a mechanics database where there's all torque specs and procedures, so I have that number ready. But in your case, find that number and set the torque wrench and torque them. Alright guys, so the number I found is 18 Newton meters. I don't know what that is in inch pounds, but it could be converted. Point is, my torque wrench has Newton meters, so 18 Newton meters. Let's torque them. Alright guys, so the camera kind of died, so I gotta use my iPad for the rest of the video, so sorry if the quality's not as good. Like I said, we're gonna torque the spark plugs. Make sure you've kind of snugged them down a little bit before. Because what they do recommend is not using this like a ratchet, because you'll wear it out quicker if you keep going like that with using it with a ratchet. So get them kind of close to snug. This one's kind of not as tight as I'd like it to be. There we go. And what you're going to do is listen for the click. That click means it's reached its torque. And the socket fell off, so give me a second. So basically, I'd like to show you another little tip. The socket gets stuck in there. All you really have to do is get this back on, switch it to reverse, break it loose, re-torque it. There you go. So if it gets kind of slightly jammed in one direction, you just have to go the other direction. That loosens it. So next plug, number 2. Click. Number 3. Plug it on. There we go. Click. Oh. There we go. And final one. Click. Now they're torqued, time to put the coils back in. Alright guys, now that the coils are back in, grab your 10mm socket and your extension. And like I said before, use it like a screwdriver. Basically get all the bolts started. Once they lined up, obviously. Now that they're started, what you're going to do is use your 3/8 ratchet, snug them down. You don't really have to torque them, but just don't put them super tight, but just snug. So let's do that. Alright, so now that they're snugged, what you're going to want to do next is start the car. Make sure it starts, because there's no point in putting the cover on if the car's not going to start. So now, let's start the car. And she starts, so let's put the cover back on. Alright, let's get the cover on. Cover's in position. Grab the little nuts. Get them started by hand. If I remember properly, one of these has issues. So just put a little bit of anti-seize on one. This one here. So I'll do that one last. Okay, just take your nut driver or your extension and 10mm socket if you don't have nut drivers, and just snug them down. Again, this is just holding on a plastic cover. This isn't anything crucial. So again, you don't have to put a lot of torque on it. This one I'm going to leave loose because I have to fix and figure out why it's sticking. That's not relevant to this video. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you learned a lot, and if you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. And I'll see you in the next how-to video.